Welcome to Another Education is Possible, a podcast about education's radical potential. I'm your host, Jordan Corson. I hate those common sense, essentialized ways that people speak about generations. You know, like Gen Z kids are this way, or Gen Xers do this or that. And maybe that's a very millennial perspective that I have. But if anybody thinks that boomers are just disengaged, out of touch, or dismissive of the utopian visions of younger folks, then today's episode offers a great challenge to that narrative. Sukey Blanc and Rachel Martin are two longtime educators, organizers, and friends living in Philadelphia. In today's episode, we talk about their organizing with the impeccably named Jewish boomers against the occupation in Palestine, their decades-long friendship, the loving differences in their politics, and the work of lifelong and intergenerational study and struggle. Before we jump into our conversation, a quick note. We're really trying to grow our podcast. If you like what you hear, please leave us a rating, download episodes, and share it widely. We hope these episodes contribute to the urgent yet often slow work of unmaking Zionism and help anti-Zionists think and study toward another world. Now, here's our conversation with Rachel Martin and Sukey Blanc. Sukey Blanc, Rachel Martin, welcome to Another Education is Possible. How are you both doing?
Good.
Good. Happy to be with you and Sukey.
Yeah. So maybe we could just start by the two of you telling us a bit about yourselves.
Yeah. I just want to contextualize where we are in the world right now.
Please.
So Rachel and I and Rachel's partner Tom were at a fundraiser for Playgrounds for Palestine last night, which is a group that's doing an amazing job of giving kids in Gaza some sense of what it's like to be a child. Mm-hmm. So I just want to, it was really an interesting event. I think it was really caring and really life embracing, which is almost impossible to do in our current context with the level of destruction, massacre, genocide. So I just kind of want to put us back into where we are.
Yeah, and they have movie nights. And they say it's just, everybody loves to go to a movie night, you know, in Gaza. And they opened a school this summer in Gaza, 120 kids, grades 1 through 5. We don't understand how they did that.
And really beautiful, non-didactic education from what we saw too.
Yeah. Wasn't that great? We saw them sitting in circles, we saw them dancing, we saw them creating stuff. I don't know if we ever saw kids facing forward.
No, there were some places. There were some places where there were chairs. Well, I noticed chairs, but not the kids sitting in the chairs.
I saw some in a circle. But I don't think imagine.
Yeah.
None of the kids were facing forward to the teacher.
Yeah. So
they teach Arabic and English.
I think that's so beautifully put, the idea of being able to offer some semblance of childhood and creating the possibility of school as a community. And
so I guess back to who we are. I mean, for me, it's just, I have found it, like many people, you know, how do we live every day with what's going on, supposedly? Oh my God, I'm sorry about this. I'll just have to turn the whole thing off. Going on, you know, supposedly in our name, in, you know, the amount of destruction. And I guess I grew up with, I I think I grew up with a pretty strong emotional connection to Israel and Israelis, not Zionism per se, but more pretty close family connections and a historical, generations long. You know, my great grandparents on one side were in Palestine in the 20s. Not so. And a lot of my family is still in Israel now, and so I feel. And I grew up here. My mom grew up here. My dad fled the Nazis from France, first from Romania, then from France, and he never saw himself as American. So I think I've come into this discussion about Israel and Zionism in Palestine from a pretty complicated, not exactly a typical American Jewish place.
Yeah. And what did that childhood look like?
Well, I grew up in most of my time was spent in suburban New Jersey, and I think my parents kind of shielded us from a lot of stuff. They were liberal, socialists actually, but I guess I've been thinking a lot about how on the emotional level of what, especially what my father experienced as a kid. I think they hid it from us. I think there were a lot of fears that were recognized, but not recognized, sort of nodded to, but not addressed. I think that has come up about really unacknowledged grief and fear in the family, which is different from what the ideology was very socialist. I always was anti-capitalist. I mean, if you ask me what a core identity is, you know, it's like socialist, feminist, Jewish, probably in that order. So does that help a little bit?
Yeah, that certainly helps. Well, I think I'd love to hear more about the complexities of your relationship to Judaism and Israel, but maybe, Rachel, you could share something similar, just an overview.
Yeah, my father was a rabbi, so, you know, my world was Jewish, except at school. And the thing was that he was revered, because rabbis are revered, and also he was a scholar, and he was actually awful. So that was tough. The first two Yiddish words I learned were mumser, which is monster, because that's what he called us, little mumsers. And then the Yiddish word for the N-word. My father used, and I must have been, I don't know, in grade school. And man, that stuck with me. He said it once when we were in the car. Maybe he said it again, but what I relate. So my father was born in Eastern Europe, and there was, so he was a rabbi, but then he became a professor, and he was prolific writer and translator. Just always worked, always. In fact, he had these 3-pronged paper clips and black felt tip pens that I would avoid all my life, but then about 10 years ago I decided, oh no, I can use these. It's cool, it's okay. Manila folders came everywhere. And I didn't talk with him very much, but what I might imagine is that he was feverishly working to restore or hold on to Yiddish culture and philosophy and language. His first language, of course, was Yiddish. So, yeah, I grew up with terror. I was in 4th grade, and I thought that the Nazis were going to get me. It's weird that I still feel it. It's so weird. 60 years later. Anyway, they were going to get me. They were going to come from behind where my there was a window behind my bed, and they would come down the street in University Heights, Ohio, and get me because my father was a rabbi, and I had a big nose, and my name was Rachel, which then was more of a Jewish name. there was I wanted to say something about this, but my father also is complicated too because he took me to anti-war moratoria. So during the Vietnam War, and when the young students were killed at Kent and Jackson State, we were in Cleveland, so he took me to Kent State. I was the only kid to come back to 8th grade, I think, with a black armband on. So I did, get some things from him that were obviously positive in all of that. He helped young men get conscious objector status, that kind of thing.
And you're both sharing this very interesting notion of kind of psychic tear moving through your upbringing. Did that relate to Israel at all, or your conception of Israel? Because I certainly grew up with thinking of Israel being the solution to that tear. Right? It was the place of safety. It was the place where the Nazis can never get you.
I didn't grow up with any sense of a place of safety, no. I mean, Israel, my parents were Zionists, and I went on all that stuff that you did a generation later, some listeners did. I did all that stuff, but no.
Right. And I did not grow up with that stuff of the going on because my parents were more like connected to Israel on an emotional and a personal level, but always very critical of the Israeli government, not of Zionism per se, but like often nowadays you hear people say they're Zionists, they think Israel can do no wrong. I'm like, I grew up in a family that was pretty connected to Israel, but Israel could probably do no right. So because you can have that emotional connection and still be critical of, well, it was of the Labor government as well as of the, Jabotinsky and Netanyahu and all of that stuff. So it also wasn't seen as a place of, it wasn't a place of safety particularly.
So when you're growing up and hearing these critiques, what did they look like? What were you learning? Was it critical of the government in the sense of we need better leaders? We're Palestinians?
Well, what I remember most clearly was after '67, when we were not very connected with the Jewish Center, although I did go to Hebrew school there, not religious school, just language school for me. I was the odd person out in the world, of that world. But anyway, but we were not very connected. But after it was one of the few Jewish institutions in the U.S., I'm sure, where there was a rabbi who, right after '67, spoke at the high holidays about the rights of Palestinians and against the occupation. And he was kicked out. And so, and my family was on his side. So I knew I wasn't a young kid, I was 13, but I knew that, Palestinians were a people and they had rights and Israel should not be taking over their land.
So I would imagine that was very different for you, Rachel, that the relationship was a much less critical one to Israel.
I didn't know the word Palestinian, and I mean, again, I know it's a more common experience than Sukey's. Israeli bonds were bought in my name for birthdays. A tree was planted in Israel. My mother only bought oranges from Jaffa. Where are they from? Anyway, Israel. No Florida oranges.
So I just want to say something about why my experience has been feels confusing to me, and why I think I have a hard time when I hear talk about Zionism and anti-Zionism, is because I also had some of those things. I also had Israel bonds and trees planted in my name, but that did not preclude a deep critique of what the state was doing at the same time. So I've had discussions with number of places where, for the first time, I realized there are a few people who grew up the same way that I did, from not even left of labor Zionist families, who grew up essentially in Marxist Zionist groups, where there was both this connection to the state and an assumption that the state had made fundamental mistakes along the way. I mean, these are people who were going back generations to the earlier part of the 20th century up until the 1940s, opposed the creation of an Israeli state. They believed in creating a binational Arab, as it was called then, Arab and Jewish state, which is what people who now often are anti-Zionists say. So it's confusing to us when we hear, because I grew up with enough of that kind of ideology, even though that it was confusing.
Maybe we should talk about your relationship and what it looks like to be friends and scholars and activists and Jews who have been on this educational journey together for many years now. So maybe just starting with how you both met.
40? Wait a minute.
That long?
No, more. More than 40, for sure.
When did we meet?
Well, Jim and I split up when I was 29.
we can cut that part out.
So I can tell you, 82 is when we met, because that's when I became the staff person of the Reproductive Rights Organization, and I was in 82, 26.
All right, well,
So, yeah. So that's what, 42 years.
that's a very long
It's a
time.
very long time.
But I think we maybe did connect about being Jewish in a certain way
It must have.
pretty early on.
And I would imagine that, I'm kind of putting an educative slant on this, but I would imagine the two of you are learning and teaching and studying together and learning from one another.
Well, we had that weekly check-in. You were doing your dissertation,
Oh.
and I was doing my book.
Oh, you mean in general,
Oh.
not about Judaism.
Oh, about
Well,
Judaism.
I was hoping that Judaism would filter through everything, but yeah, I think, using the word intersectional, or just kind of,
but
you are many things.
But Jewish was not one of those identities in our collective.
Even though there were a lot of Jews.
It was suppressed. We were part of the Jewish, non-Jewish identified left in that. And I was in my whole life. Maybe you were more Jewish in other parts of it, but in my political life until now, I was never Jewish.
Inactive. Well, my partner at the time, who I lived with and moved to Philly with, was, I think, one of the founding members of New Jewish Agenda. So that was part of my, although I was like a sister traveler. I wasn't an activist in that way.
And maybe this is a time then to ask, so for you, the change was a bit more dramatic in terms of Israel. So you grew up not really having critiques, not really thinking outside of a Zionist framework, and now you are explicitly anti-Zionist. So are these...
But I wasn't fervently Zionist.
Maybe more a passive
yeah,
Zionist.
yeah.
But the move from that passivity to where you are now, did that start to emerge at this time when you and Sukey met, when you moved to Philadelphia?
I think that what pushed it was being on the left, and I had a good friend, a very, very close friend, who I've known longer than you, probably 45, 46 years, who is not Jewish, could not accept. So this friend assumed that I was a Zionist, and that bothered her, of course. And how do I say that? She had a hard time grasping that, no, I don't align with Israel. I just had to keep hitting her over the head. I'm like, why do I have to keep proving this to you? But I think because of her, it pushed me to articulate that more and be more clear about that. You were always suspect on the left if you were Jewish.
That's really interesting in a horrifying way. That is frightening, but...
Can I say one thing, though, that I think the reason I wasn't active as a Jew for Palestine, I mean, I was always more, I was drawn to grassroots work. That's what moved my kishkas, was doing grassroots political work. I mean, I raised my daughter to know what Israel was doing, but I wasn't an activist at all for Palestine until October. But that's the reason, I think.
Oh, but that's interesting because I was then, in a sense, more active in that I had done some actions with, I don't know if I did anything with JVP. Well, I definitely went to some events sponsored by JVP. I did some stuff with If Not Now, and I did education and advocacy around my family member who was a draft resistor in Israel. So it's not, so this is the examples of things are not very straight line forward.
I was actually thinking, well, bat mitzvah for sure, and also October 7. Yeah, because, I mean, what's cool is that Sukey and I kvetch to each other about organizing, and get support for, things that come up in organizing, like, oh, I did all this work and then so-and-so didn't do their part, and, or intergenerational stuff, like, intergenerational stuff, organizing with young people when you're the only old person. So we are totally supportive of each other's work, including, so Sukey, was one of the one of five main organizers for October 7.
For what?
For the
you mean just? Oh, you mean just
the vigil?
The vigil, yeah.
And I actually was sick, so I couldn't go. But didn't plan to go, but I was 100% behind Sukey doing it, and watched the she sent me the media coverage. I watched it a few times, and just a side note is that after October 7th, that first week, I don't know if you remember this, there was
going back to 2023.
Sorry, 23. That first week there was a gathering to mourn, and Sukey and I were talking. I was like, I just don't feel. I'm not in a mourning place. I'm in a rage place. So there just are moments when we're. So I didn't want to go to October 7, 2024. Personally, it's not what I needed to do was mourn the Jewish lives lost. If I had close family in Israel, I might very well feel differently if Israel, of course, hadn't then started a war. I might feel differently, but it just didn't, for me, it didn't feel like where I wanted to put my energy. So that's, you want to say anything about that?
Well, I didn't get involved because it was where I wanted to put my energy. I got involved because Prayers for Peace was co-sponsoring it as part of a 3-day thing.
Yeah.
And we were really clear that it was the Palestinians and Prayers for Peace felt that they could honor a day of grief for Israelis if we were also separately honoring a day of grief for Palestinians and another day moving forward, and that it was part of a comprehensive whole. And so I was delegated, so two things happened. I was delegated to be the representative for October 7th, and then simultaneously, If Not Now, asked me to be a coordinator on that. So it was pretty interesting that I was not going into it as just that. And in fact, leading up to it, because I was carrying all the pieces in my head to the extent possible, given who I am, I wasn't sure I was going to feel grief on that day But it was a really powerful ritual, and I did, and it was really meaningful. So that was an interesting experience. So I just think it's like, you know, like, why did you, like, I don't know, I just feel like it was a little bit of an assumption you were making about why. I mean, we were definitely different on the 3 days. I mean, in October 2023, we were really different. That I did feel like I needed to mourn, and I needed to mourn both. That was really clear. I needed to be able to mourn both sides. That really meant a lot to me to be able to do that. But it just sort of as an example of how I had moved in the last year, was that I was a lot less focused on the Israelis a year later.
You're true, you are. But I'm even less focused, and I think I was worried that, you know, we know someone who, it's Jim, but who was thinking of doing a performance art where he would read the name of an Israeli killed October 7, then 43 names of Palestinians. Now, of course, the number, it's probably more than 43, but, you know, another Jewish name, 43 names of Palestinians. And I worried that having a separate day for October 7 would set up a false equivalency. And I also, and this has nothing to do with you, but lots of Jews came on Monday. I think there were estimates for 500 people. Only April 18th had that many people. I mean, in 1 year, we've only had 2 events or actions or vigils that size. And it was, a lot of Jews. And I wish I could say, well, great. And then maybe next time they'll go to a Palestinian protest or vigil, because they're not so far. So it's easy for me. I think it's easy for me. It's just how I feel emotionally. Just emotionally, but also, well, not just emotionally, but tactically too. But it's also easier for me because I don't have people in Israel.
What you said, Rachel, I am standing behind Sukey and choosing not to go to this one thing, or I'm so excited to watch you, say, on the news, but I'm not going to attend myself. Getting back to these smaller moments, I think seders, bat mitzvahs, where are these disagreements and...
Not in seders, do you think? Oh, no. Maybe.
Do we have differences in Seder?
Well, so Seder, you think that's our happy place?
Happy place? Say that again.
Is Seder our happy place?
Our happy place.
There's often tension.
We've had people
leave.
boycotting the Seder.
We have someone who doesn't come anymore. Sukey and I have been doing... I've lived other places. I left Philly and lived in New Mexico and elsewhere, but anyway, I've been back in Philly since 2006, I think. So Seder, so we had someone over Israel who, over something, it was a Zoom Seder during COVID, and he will no longer come because of some things that were said about Israel.
But it did come up about matzah. I remember it started with matzah.
How?
Whether we were going to, because one of...
Get matzah from Israel. And we just assumed, I think, right? Or I did.
Well, it was a Zoom Seder, so I don't remember what the conversation... It was one of Nomi's friends was talking about. I sort of remember. I actually think this was also partly a generational thing.
Yeah.
Because I think it was some young people who were like, of course we're not getting matzah from Israel. And so if you're someone who's... What?
And I wasn't going to get matzah from Israel.
No, I know, but I don't think you would have said it quite in the same way. Because you were in a different... You do know even... But this was before, really, really bad discussions happened, or non-discussions. But even then, I think you knew. Some people had more Israel sensitivities. Like, you just wouldn't have been, of course we don't get,
But I think Seder has been, like, 1 year I was not up to facilitating. Something was going on in my life, and I asked Sukey to do it, even though it was at my house and everything. I feel like you and I are very aligned in Seders, and I rely. While I'm sort of the facilitator in making connections and connecting what people are saying to each other, Sukey will come up with something provocative.
Oh yeah, yeah.
That's your role.
That's my role.
Another way to get conversation going.
Yeah, like I disagree with things.
Any examples in particular?
So what we often do is we take a drop. You put your finger in the wine cup. You drop it on your plate for each of the plagues. But we started doing it for victories, political victories in the last year, a drop for each victory. But then Sukey made a good case for remembering the plagues. There was also, the whole, oh gosh, every year it comes up. Are we really going to have something in the Seder plate that represents passing over the Jews' houses and getting the Egyptians? That's been a common theme.
Has it been?
Yeah.
You see, I'm going more and more to certain of the traditional things, actually,
Yeah,
and their symbolic power.
Yeah, which is a very nice balance.
And considering I grew up in a non-religious home, it's pretty interesting.
I do just have to interject. I've been on a long journey to try to find anti-Zionist Judaica. I don't keep Passover, but I love matzah because you can put as much butter on it as you want. And I am still on a journey to find what it sounds like you all found. Non-Israeli matzah is a thing.
Yeah.
What is it? Stripes?
Tom gets it. I don't know.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Tell your listeners.
Yeah.
You can find matzah not made in Israel, and you will post something about that.
That is fantastic. For those of us who want to take that journey and support BDS, that is one direction to go.
Right.
And I don't want to make this too linear, but I think you're starting to gesture towards some of the joys and fun of the intergenerational aspect of your work. But
we should talk about the bar mitzvah briefly. I
was going to say, but that was exactly what I was going to ask. Before I start getting into your broader work, I've been pushing towards it. And
it's fine.
If you're okay talking about it, let's talk about the bat mitzvah.
You were right. That one Seder in particular. Oh, others. Paul was upset at the young people for another Seder.
Maybe it's the same one.
I don't think so.
Anyway.
So Seder does bring up some tensions between the young people there, and I'm usually agreeing with them, but I'm not. I don't put it the way they do. Anyway, so my daughter had a bat mitzvah that was made up entirely, just made up from soup to nuts, and
but it was first she went to folk shul, which is where my kids went.
Yes.
That just is about our relationship, as far as our relationship.
Yeah.
It didn't work, so then she kind of created her own after.
Yeah.
But there were some examples of non-religious.
Oh, definitely.
That's what I just
secular.
want to say.
Yeah,
secular, which we were partly from us. I think you got those, maybe from other places too.
Right, and then we didn't have a Torah portion. We let her have any topic in the whole world. We actually held it at the Calvary Church in 48th in Baltimore, and we covered the font. We had a Pueblo giveaway at the end. I mean, we just really made it up, and it's pretty joyous. But her topic that she chose was how and when to teach young children about traumatic historical events. So, as part of that, two of her mentors, who were older than us, independently sent her something called 7 Jewish Children to Play for Gaza. Very short play, almost like a poem. And there are 7 roles to play. And Naomi was going to direct it, and we needed 7 people who were comfortable, doing that. And my brother declined because he thought it was anti-Zionist, and Sukey declined. And at the time, my memory is so strong that because of my brother, that Sukey's, and I remember we talked about it in our family, that Sukey's, at the time, her critique was that it was anti-Zionist. And if anything, I thought it was maybe, I thought it really equated the struggle of Palestinians with the struggle of Jews before during and after the Holocaust. At the time, I remember thinking, oh, why can't Sukey just do this for Nomi? But I've changed. Now I feel very strongly that I wouldn't want a friend to model to my daughter that you do something to please people that really is against what you believe. But you have another, as you read it now, you have a different critique.
Well, I really doubt, this is something I was thinking about after we talked last night.
Yeah.
That I really doubt that I said my critique was anti-Zionist. I believe your brother did, but I doubt I used that word because I did not identify as a Zionist. I have not identified as a Zionist, for the last 40 years. So I doubt that I would specifically say it was anti-Zionist. What I think more likely is that I felt it did not capture the reality of Israeli perceptions, or that's what. So I think I might have more likely said it was anti-Israel than anti-Zionist.
Fair. Absolutely fair. And then in my mind, I conflated them.
Yeah. Anti-Israeli and not anti-Zionist. Because
Yeah.
there's a difference between
Absolutely.
the people and the state.
Exactly.
Or some people think there's no difference between the people
but we
and
get
the state.
it. Yeah. So that happened. Yeah.
But maybe flashing all the way forward to right now and how I came to know the two of you, could you start by just sharing what this banner is, this world-famous banner?
100%. And I just thought of something that I don't know if you can splice it back in. And I don't know if it's important. But speaking of Haggadah, do you know the Aurora Morales, her The Red Sea poem? Well, we use it, I've used it just only the last 3 years as the story of Passover. And the reason I wanted to bring it up is it shows my own struggle, this equivalency thing. So here's a brief bit of it. So she refers to the first crossing of the Red Sea back when. This time we're tied at the ankles. We cannot, maybe you've heard it, we cannot cross until we carry each other, until the family blasted into fragments at the Seder table bears the body of the Arab man beaten outside your friend's apartment. Until the child bulldozed to death in her grandmother's house gathers in her arms the couple blown up on the bus. So that's the tenor of the poem. This is just an excerpt. And the end says, this time it's all of us or none, this crossing. And my daughter feels like it's, she doesn't like it because it's equivalent. And I don't think I would have used it a number of years ago. But it speaks to me now. That was contradiction with other things, I think, actually.
And I say justice first before I say peace, because I understand there's not going to be any peace until there's justice, whatever justice is. But I just feel really strongly about that.
And were you about to say until the occupation ends?
Yes, and I took out occupation because occupation can mean different things.
Well, and the group we started is Jewish Boomers Against Occupation in Palestine. Should we go to that? You want to talk about the first meeting?
No, I had enough emotion.
Well, maybe you could just descriptively share what the banner is and where it appears.
Yes. But forgive me, I have to say, it emerges out of the difficulty of this meeting, so you can cut it if you want. But I don't know, there may be 12 of us, 13 of us in October got together in my backyard. We all knew each other, though some hadn't seen each other for decades, except for one person who just showed up on a Zoom and had gray hair, and so I invited her, which is not always the best thing to do. So the reason that Sukey and I were going to Zooms in October, and we saw one person who we knew from years and years ago who was old, and so we three of us got together and we decided to have a presence as older people. That first meeting was really tricky because we sort of intended to be an ad hoc group. We weren't going to form a new organization. There's lots of organizing going on. We had two goals, which is to increase the visibility of older Jews in the movement and to get information. See, a lot of older Jews were not on the apps and the chats, and that's where all the info goes out. I'm delighted to hear that some young people too have difficulty with the apps and chats. So we got together and we knew a banner made sense. But when we talked about the banner, because we didn't have, it was October and we had a banner with 7 bullet points, which isn't effective. So, so the three of us who originated the thing, we just made an undemocratic decision. Okay, we're not going to have any bullet points. We're just going to have the name of the organization. That's the name of the group. The name of whatever, we're not even a group, but Jewish Boomers Against Occupation in Palestine. Now, because that first meeting it was contentious in a lot of ways. And so the second meeting, and I learned this at Highlander, which you'd asked about before, at the Highlander, it used to be the Highlander School, and now it's the Highlander Center. Every meeting that takes place, or whatever kind of activists are coming together, who's ever coming together, we sit in rocking chairs. Rocking, which just really, it's hard to be real tense if you're rocking. Also, everybody sings all the time. There's music, music, music. So the banner, we were a little worried about the second meeting, where we were going to make the banner. And the reason we went with fabric banner was I thought, well, if we're all, sitting around and cutting and pinning and helping each other and making mistakes and laughing at each other's mistakes, that would just chill us out. And then we had master sewers, which was fortunate. 2 master sewers who put the whole thing together. So the banner made its made itself viral at the Penn encampment. And I'm going to read some. It was 1.2 million, views?
Wow, is that how many is that?
1.2 at the last time a young person looked for me.
Wow, that's great.
Are they called views?
Yeah, I think it depends if you got 1.2 million likes or shares or views or...
I don't
depends
know.
on, yeah.
No idea.
It made its debut and soon after went viral, I think is the takeaway. And I think the key here is that it's explicitly named Jewish Boomers Against the Occupation in Palestine, and it's appearing at the Penn encampment.
We should talk about boomers for a second.
Right, yeah, right. There was a big debate.
Seniors, old heads, oldsters.
Yeah.
What else? Oh, elders.
Elders.
Ugh.
We didn't have ultra-cockers.
Which all have fantastic associations, right? I think for folks who aren't aware, I believe Old Heads is a Philadelphia thing.
Is it?
Well, it did appear on Abbott Elementary. So.
If it appeared on Abbott, right? That you always think of, particularly it's bound up in gentrification, but people will say like, oh yeah, that person down the block is an old head. And that means
they have knowledge.
Yeah, and I think in organizing spaces, elder carries something very specific, right? I'm a movement elder, and we have.
That felt like so self-aggrandizing to me.
Yeah, but so why boomers?
Okay.
How did it get to be boomers?
Well, some people didn't like it at all.
I know they didn't, but who brought it up? Oh, you did. But once we started using boomers, it wouldn't. We couldn't stop.
And Chabaub.
And Chabaub. And but people, and people just latched onto boomers.
Yeah, and I didn't know that it was a derogatory thing among young people somehow.
Yeah.
But people say, hey, you're reclaiming it. So.
Yeah.
All right. So here's some of the comments from when it went on, whatever forum it went on. If you're over 40, you learn some new vocabulary. Based. A lot of people say we were based. Based boomers. Based. Based is good. That's all I know. People often forget that those were the students in the 60s rallying against Vietnam. Oh my God, I love them. A lot of love. Boomers know you got to cut those little flaps in your canvas. Someone replied this was intergenerational protest knowledge. Another one, you know they're about this shit because they have the wind flaps in their banner. Another one, yeah, you know Boomer Dad showed up, saw the sign, pulled out one of the 5 multi-tools he carries in his pocket to add those. Someone else said, other option, crafty granny got the rotary cutter out to make the whole thing. And that's why it looks so nice.
Which is the true one.
The granny, yeah. It's giving seasoned. Some OG protesters right there. Faith in boomers restored. I don't know how you say this. You know when young people add a lot of S's? Okay, boomers.
Yeah.
I don't know how to say that.
Yeah.
And then they wrote, not derogatory.
Yeah.
I was there and a lot of us were geeking out about the expertise, going back to the flaps. The heavy weight of experience, back to the flaps. And these some swaggy boomers. And then 2 that were, maybe I said one that were moving was Faith in Boomers Restored. And I think that we didn't form for that reason or have the banner, but a third reason to exist is for young people to see that there are people, their parents' generation, who are right there with them. And then in Arabic, and someone wrote in English, even the boomers are with us. Yeah, even the boomers. And there was one quick thing that happened at Penn, which is that our banner's big, 7 feet long, and some people at the Penn encampment, this is the first day the Penn encampment went up, and there was an Israeli flag. So the protesters asked us to just move, cover the flag, which we did. We dwarfed the flag. And we were all packed in really tight. So right next to me was a very tall person with a pro-Palestinian sign. Right behind him, like no more than a foot, were the counter-protesters. So the really tall person and a counter-protester turned around, faced each other, and had a stare down. Not blinking. Both of their chests kind of puffed up and like practically touching. Like they were just, going to have a, like, you know what I mean? Can you picture it? Yeah. And I'm like, oh, this is gonna explode. So I'm on my phone asking for the de-escalators to come over. Yeah, have the de-escalators come over, and then I'm saying to someone saying next to me, "This is not good. This is not good. Somebody's got to stand down here." And the tall person, I say tall because they just were kind of imposing with their height, turned around. I don't know if it was because of me, but then the best part comes. Then the counter-protesters started hurling insults at us. And one of the things they said was, "You're too old to be so stupid." And kind of went like, I'm ready to put up my fists, but I didn't, I stopped. I was just sort of stopped in midair. And this pro-Palestinian protester leans way down to me and says, "You got this." I loved it. And then I knew, right, I just turned around. I just loved that he did that. They did that.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And really gets at what you spoke about earlier of I think complexity doesn't do it justice, but that there are joys and there are moments of maybe frustration, but the wonderful work of intergenerational organizing and intergenerational education in this sense. So I'd love to hear more about what that experience is like at Penn, in your general involvement in these different spaces and groups, because I know, I'm going to get it wrong, Jabalp is one small part of what the two of you are doing.
This is going to sound, well, I love my young people. It sounds very condescending, but I have gotten a lot of joy actually out of, sometimes I feel like I've learned a lot from.
Say those things.
Well, let me think of what they were. I didn't prepare now. Yeah. Analysis, facility with words, Um, what else? I don't know. I feel like one of the things that Rachel and I have in common, I think even that it doesn't have anything to do with the ideology, but I think it's pretty true for all of us about, well, no matter exactly where our politics are, is we are just a little less hesitant to jump on any particular thing. I don't mean that we can't be enthusiastic, but I think we, tend to a little more reflection. And it doesn't have to do with, you think, something.
Yes.
And it's not that the young people aren't reflective. They're really reflective and really thoughtful. But they seem to be most of them a little easier to turn on a dime. And I don't mean politically, but, it's just like, let's just do this and we're going to get, kind of thing. And for me, this is not true for Rachel, because Rachel has, it's probably because your young people live here in Philly with you, so you're a little more exposed in a direct way to non-binary gender fluidity in a daily basis.
Oh, you mean the people in my family?
In your family.
Yeah.
I bet if I was if my family was right here too, I would have it also. But because I don't, I was a little slower to come to a direct involvement with, not making assumptions about pronouns, that, and just getting
we
used.
had a big conversation about it a few years ago.
Yeah, we did. Yeah, just getting.
We weren't aligned there. Yeah.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, certain things.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, so I think that I think that's in a way that's the most that is challenging, and that's learning for me, right? It's like learning.
That it's multi-directional, that learning is happening.
Yeah, I think
you're learning from folks at the encampment, you're teaching folks at the encampment.
It's not so much the encampment for me, but it's through the Peers for Peace work.
Yeah.
For me, if not now, the core team, I was the only older person on it, and I'm the only older person, in meetings and Prayers for Peace.
We have older people.
You have older people, so. And someone was going to, a group of young people were going to sort of start a new group. And I was very interested, but I just didn't want to be the only old person.
I think we were a little more structured, actually.
Yeah, a little more, yeah. We've been to way more meetings than they have. Like it frustrates me when there's a meeting, a mass meeting, and the chairs are all facing forward. Like just basic, just don't have the chairs facing forward. But that doesn't, I feel like often those kind of, a lot of my ideas don't really, nobody, you run the flagpole, no one salutes. But, so how do I feel respected? I mean, I think I do feel respected in that Sukey and I know Philly really well. Like some people went to college here, stayed, or they've just been here a few years. So we know the city and we have a big network. So I think we're really appreciated. They're calling us for that, and we're appreciated for that. I think a challenge is that, when we were activists until whatever year, we didn't have cell phones. We didn't even have phones that you could walk around with without a cord. We were tied to the wall. And what we did was we would activate the phone tree. So if something was, you know what that phone tree. Yeah. Do you think everyone knows what the phone tree is?
Maybe you could just explain. I should not be the one dictating.
Explain a phone tree?
Well, a phone tree is when one person picks up a phone and calls a few other people.
Maybe 3 people.
And then they call three others.
And so pretty soon, everyone at the Parent and Teacher Association or the activist group has been called. And it develops relationships that way. And also you're saying, hey, do you need a ride to the meeting? I think that, and so without, I think that's lost, and I think it's not so good. Like we would have protests, and there'd be new people that nobody knew, and I think young people aren't just oriented to going up and welcoming them and finding about their background and how'd you get here, and would love to, hey, are you going my way on the way home, I don't mean to just complain. Am I just complaining? It's just hard, I guess.
And it sounds like it's not just people, it's kind of the mechanisms of organizing in the present, right? That were, and I would argue in favor of saying, yeah, we become a bit alienated from some of this work, from even some of the materials of this work. So are there times where you think this should just be among folks in the boomers group, or are there times when you think, well, let's bring this to everybody, or just kind of how do you balance that wanting to speak within your...
Oh, you're using an affinity group that way.
In a very broad sense, I'm thinking of affinity group as...
See, I think before a year ago, affinity group to me was the people you get arrested with.
Oh.
And that was doing civil disobedience. And the affinity group, well, I do know that I guess we called them caucuses before. Anyway, there was different language. So you're talking about affinity group as identity-based?
Clearly, as your sign suggests, right? What counts as a boomer? It's supposed to be somebody who's technologically confused and disengaged politically and just concerned with their 401k, and you're not allowed to have radical politics. You're not allowed to show up at the protests. But anyway, to suggest the idea that affinity is shared kind of with a group like the Jewish boomers, and how you might balance something like, hey, we have an idea. Do we want to talk about it internally, or do we want to bring it to a broader group?
Oh, I have a thought.
Yeah.
Well, see, Jabout, until now, we have just been a banner and an email list. An email list, so I go through the apps and the chats and then put the actions and events to email. And we have some young people who said, oh, I need to be on that because I don't want to do all those apps and chats. And so we have not.
We had one discussion about the encampment at Penn. That was the
Do you
one.
mean? Oh, we did. On a Zoom meeting.
We had a Zoom meeting.
That's an important thing.
Because you were feeling for a while like people weren't responding, and we decided to have a discussion for people to share their thoughts or questions and talk. Because you and I don't know who else had been down there, but you were the main person who'd been down there to
And
talk.
some people were scared to go. They thought they'd heard it was violent, or they heard it was anti-Jewish. So we had an open Zoom discussion.
And one or two other people had.
Yeah.
Some other people had been there besides for you too.
And then the thing coming up is that I've gotten excited about this Green Olive Collective, and it's the first thing that just seemed right for Jabout. The other thing that seemed right for Jabout, but it fell apart, was the movie Foragers. The movie Foragers is about Palestinians who forage for the spices that they use on a daily basis. Well, it's illegal, and the Israeli government not only has made it illegal, but they will put people on trial and put them in jail under the guise of environmental protection. Foragers, and a lot of them are old. They're just right back out there doing it, and so that seemed like a cool thing for Jabout to co-sponsor with it. Now, fell apart for a different reason, but the thing coming up that I've just initially suggested the idea, and we'll see if it, take it from here after the election, is the Green Olive Collective forms solidarity circles with villages in the West Bank. And the solidarity circle pledges a monthly amount to support olive trees and rebuilding homes after destruction, and then also has a monthly Zoom with people in the village, and gets, with the decimation of journalists, Palestinian and Arab journalists, we're just not getting on the ground information, on the ground stories. This is a way to hear what's happening in this West Bank on a daily basis, and then we would then spread that word. Because I think, I hate to say, but I guess there's some news fatigue, whereas stories might grab people, might grab Jabalpers in a different way.
And I also think it's, if you're connecting with a particular part of the movement or a particular set of people, it just helps strengthen.
Yeah.
It's different than news. I mean, yeah.
But why Jabalp?
Or why would Jabalp do
Yeah.
that?
Why?
Oh, no,
why?
that could, well, because it's a
ready-made.
It's a ready-made group, because you could do it with another group, but why not do it with one that exists?
Right.
And also because they have money, and might also, some people in it are active and go to demos and stuff, and some people might not, but they could still do something like this.
That's right. From their homes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, only speaking for yourselves, having been through decades of friendship, decades of organizing work, I'm hesitating a bit because I'm there's no way to not ask you to speak for others, but with all of this wisdom, for folks who are just starting out, for folks who maybe had the energy of the encampment and are now encountering having different ideas, maybe somebody has an explicit anti-Zionism and kind of a Marxist non-Zionism. Maybe some folks are trying to wrestle with emerging friendships or friendships who are kind of in difficult places. What kind of wisdom can you offer? What ideas can you offer or do you have a sense of how you've stayed in it both as organizers and as friends?
People struggling personally with relationships?
I think just asking what advice you might offer to somebody who wants to be where you are, have 40 plus years of friendship, and be as deeply committed to liberatory politics as you were 42 years ago. If you have any insight of anything they might want to hold on to.
First thing that comes to mind, which we talk about, is taking this. So now it's called self-care. I don't like that somehow. But really knowing when you need a break, knowing when it's not a hill you want to die on, because it is the long haul. It's the long haul. You can't do the long haul if you're constantly in struggle. What was the slogan? It's been a no unity, all struggle day.
Oh, yeah.
That was a cartoon. It's been an all struggle, no unity day. You can't be in struggle all the time.
Well, that's true. But I also think, this is going to sound a little snide, pick your friends well. Because I feel like, the world we're in, and we've been in since we were 30, it's not that we're in no other worlds, but we are in a world where people are paying attention to what's happening outside of them, outside of their own personal lives, and are trying to be active about it. And with radical politics. And varying degrees. Oh, that's another thing. Don't be sectarian. That's my number one. Don't be sectarian.
You got that, everybody?
Can you share a little bit more about what that means?
Well, I'm thinking about in terms of friendships. It's like, because I was thinking about, because I said people have a radical belief things can change. But then I'm thinking, yeah, but you know what? Some of what we do is electoral work. And so I think it's kind of have faith that there can be some social movements and political movements, and sometimes they're broad, but stay in touch with people who are doing stuff that you think is important. Because I know there are other people who are like, how are you doing? They're just, in other words, I'm not even talking about, they're not necessarily conservative or they're not necessarily Zionist. They're just in different worlds. And I'm probably someone, I would say I've gotten dragged along by Rachel and by my partner, Paul. I mean, I sometimes might tend myself to be more of someone who walks on the beach and reads books. But because of my friends, I don't. And it's really important to me that I don't.
You have some liberal friends.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. How do you manage those relationships?
I love them.
No, but how do you talk about, like, this has come up, how do we talk about Palestine with our liberal friends?
Well, I think they're my liberal. Oh, I'll talk about my most Zionist friend. She she said something really sweet to me the other day. She was a childhood friend, and she said, "I was just thinking about how your family had a sukkah," and she said they weren't religious, but they were really Jewish. And I think that was, for them, actually, it was a little bit the Israeli connection, and so for her, I think I've tried to emphasize for her that I am Jewish, and I'm doing this because I care about Jews as well as Palestinians. That's and I think for around Israel and Palestine, I think that is how I kind of handle it. That's not exactly what your question was, but
well, you helped me. So I was about to go to stay with friends in Boston who, back in January, were not willing to use the word genocide, and initially, I have feel after one very bad conversation with a liberal friend, I sort of said to others, I just want to save our friendships. Let's not talk about this. But then when you're staying in someone's house and you talk about everything anyway, it's just really hard. And so in January it was really difficult. And then I was going back now, but I was also going for a wedding. And while I don't want the state involved in my relationship, I love weddings. Love. So that was a real high. And so Sukey suggested, she helped me with it. She said, why don't you say, I'm here for a celebration. I'm in this place of, happiness and celebration. I just kind of want to stay here. And something about loving them, I forget, and I just want to enjoy my time with you because I love you. It was just very, very positive way to talk with them.
And it worked?
Well,
shutting things out not to.
Even in January, to not use the word genocide. And I was like, okay, how many do you need to not call it genocide? I mean, but anyway, now they do not feel that the difference they say is that to both of them, don't feel the need to bring up the attack on Israelis every time you talk about Palestine.
Today's episode was produced by Yardana Amran and Samantha Haley. You can find us on Instagram at Another Education is Possible. For today's episode, Rachel and Sukey have identified the organizations Green Olive Collective and Playgrounds for Palestine as places to contribute. If you're able, please do contribute to these amazing organizations. We'll have more information on them as well as information about Rachel and Sukey on our socials. Thanks as always for listening. We'll be back soon with another episode of Another Education is Possible.